The rapper Killer Mike is generally a pretty left-wing guy. He very vocally supported Bernie Sanders in the last election and campaigned for him. So I really like Killer Mike. But he decided, in response to the March for Our Lives protests that are going on now, to do a video with the NRA. Now, actually, I should be fair. I'm not explaining that properly. Apparently, he did this video with the NRA before March for Our Lives, and, you know, they're now releasing it at around the same time as March for Our Lives is actually happening. So, you know, the chronology there is a little different than I originally indicated, but nonetheless, he sat down with the NRA. Let's watch his conversation, and then we'll discuss.
So I have to ask, what are you really marching for? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a march to burn the Constitution and rewrite the parts that you all like in crayon. With everything that's happened, like with the Parkland shooting.
Yeah. Very tragic.
Very. And what's odd to me, I know why it's being done. You know, it's systematic.
Yeah.
But this idea that because I'm a gun owner or I'm hardcore about the Second Amendment or, you know, from that perspective, it's like, that doesn't mean that I lack the empathy or the ability to sympathize
Not
with
at
what
all.
happened.
That's not at all.
If anything, it's quite the opposite.
Yeah.
It's like, we disagree about how we both want to save these kids' lives.
Yeah.
Period. But somehow, because my method doesn't agree with your method,
Yeah.
I'm a monster.
Yeah.
Or something wrong
And that's
with
unfair.
it. You know what I mean?
I have worked as a tireless advocate on the behalf of children, disenfranchised women in my community.
Yeah.
And I've also worked with gun groups like Georgians Against Gun Violence that are not, you know, the most pro Second Amendment.
Yeah.
But I say if there's a table to be sat at, the gun owner needs to be there. So I kind of try to see a problem from the whole perspective. And there have been things that you've disagreed with me. There's been that I disagree with you. As friends, we've talked, right? But there was something dead on that the woman who's an NRA spokesman said, and everyone just kind of lost it. What's her name?
Dana.
Dana said something. I don't agree with everything Dana says, but Dana says that the tears of white mothers are like ratings, and that's so true. And it was so sad to hear her acknowledge it. Yeah. But it's true, and black people know it's true because black people say it in conversations in coffee houses to themselves.
There's a lot of people who think they woke out here will realize very quickly they ain't so woke.
You not woke. You not woke. Nah. Wakanda, everybody had guns and spears and everything else you needed. Yeah, like you can't continue to be the lackey.
Yeah.
Like people are accusing you of being a lackey of the NRA. Well, you're a lackey of the progressive movement because you have never disagreed with the people who tell you what to do. Like, think about that. You have never disagreed with, you've never said to them, hey, hold up. Hold on. A football player just got shot by an armed white man for a traffic argument. A black teenager got shot by an armed white man in a gas station because he had played his music loud. Where were you then?
You're gonna progress us right off a cliff. Yeah. You keep going in this direction.
You're gonna progress us into slavery.
Yeah, pretty much.
You know, people say, oh, slavery can't exist. Slavery does exist now. Slavery exists according to the 13th Amendment.
They never abolished it.
The same people who are telling you we need to abolish the Second Amendment, they ain't there for the documentary 13. Why are your allies not fighting your other fights with the same vigor you're fighting these? Like I told my kids on the school walkout, I love you. If you walk out that school, walk out my house.
I'm laughing, but it's so serious.
That's simple. We are a gun-owning family. Yeah. We are a family where my sister farms. We're a family where we'll fish, we'll hunt, but we are not a family that jumps on every single thing an ally of ours does because some stuff we just don't agree with.
Here we are. We have a march that's going on next week, and our biggest celebrities are donating millions to a march. Yeah. While our inner city schools over here are in deplorable conditions. We're donating $3 million to a march about gun control. Yeah. But yet we have communities over here that are in economic downturn. Like it's ridiculous to me. Yeah.
Celebrities often don't know what to do. They're told what to do. I had a celebrity very famous, like sold well over 20, 30 million records, called me and said, hey, Mike, what you doing right now? I said, I ain't doing nothing. He said, could I call you? I was like, what's up? He called me, he was at a radio station, they were pressuring him to do a anti-gun thing. And I could tell he wasn't comfortable with it. And He said, would you mind explaining them and why you, and I'll say, very simply. I said, I'm African American, 54 years out of apartheid. I'm very pro Second Amendment. This is why. And before you say, well, what about the children? My daughter goes to Savannah State University. There was also a shooting on that campus. Talked to my wife and daughter after that. The decision was, we're going to go to Savannah. She's going to get a gun and train more.
So he's getting a lot of flack for going on, the NRA's channel, and he has subsequently apologized because he said the interview I did is now being used in the sense that it's being released around the same time as March for Our Lives, and it's being framed as I'm in total opposition to March for Our Lives. And he goes on to say, I'm actually in favor of March for Our Lives, and I support what they're doing. And he's saying, listen, the interview was kind of taken out of context. I support March for Our Lives, and I'm sorry that this is being used in the way that it's used. That's unfair to the people who are in March for Our Lives. So he did a good apology. And Killer Mike he's so good on so many issues that I'm biased now in that I like him. So I'm inclined to be like, okay, fine, whatever, it's cool. I think the thing that annoyed me about this interview is it's not that he disagrees with, the broader left-wing movement on the issue of gun reform. It's that I feel like there was just a very clear straw manning going on of his opponents. So, and, the guy at the beginning said it. He's like, what's this protest really about? Well, it looks to me like you want to burn the Constitution and rewrite it in crayon. So in other words, that's a smear. That's what that is. Now, he might say, that's not a smear. That is a smear. Because he's acting like the interpretation of the Second Amendment that we have right now is just 100% accurate and there's no question about it. That's not true. So, for example, the Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. But they always ignore that first part. A well-regulated militia. So, there's an argument, hey, if you're not in a militia, it doesn't necessarily mean you can have a gun. And there's an argument, actually, there's not an argument about this part. The word regulated is right in the Second Amendment. So when your argument is, we're not allowed under the Constitution to regulate guns, that's just factually wrong. The word regulated is right in the fucking Second Amendment. So I think my problem with what was going on here is not that there's a disagreement between Killer Mike and left-wingers in general on this issue. It's that he's partaking in a giant straw man of progressives on this issue. And, he said, they want to progress us. They want to progress us into slavery. That's what he said. As if having, some mild vanilla gun reforms are going to equate slavery. Come on, man. You know that that's a bullshit argument because Killer Mike is really smart. So it's not like he doesn't know that that's a poor fucking point. He knows it's a bad point, but he made the point anyway. And then he talks about how, well, we don't hop on the progressive bandwagon. We think for ourselves. So if my kids end up partaking in this March for Our Lives and they march out of school, they can march right out of my house. Well, hold on now, Killer Mike. Listen, man. You just said I'm not in favor of bandwagon thinking. And then you say you're going to tell your kids, if you don't hop on my bandwagon thinking, I'm going to kick you out of my house. What kind of sense does that make? I'm not in favor of bandwagon thinking. Here's my thoughts on guns. And if my kids don't agree with me, I'm going to kick them out of the house. So then that's you forcing them to get on your bandwagon because you don't want to get on the left-wing bandwagon. So are you for bandwagon thinking or are you not? If you're not in favor of bandwagon thinking, then, your kids should be able to think whatever they want. And if they want to protest on this issue, you let them protest on this issue. So that's my point here is I actually don't mind at all the disagreements at all. It's just that you have to represent your opponents accurately, and Killer Mike is not doing that by any stretch of the imagination here. Because from everything I've seen about March for Our Lives, they're really clear about what they're calling for. David Hogg is one of the kids who's been front and center over this, and he went on Fox News and said, I'm not against the Second Amendment. Here's what I'm in favor of. I'm in favor of universal background checks. I'm in favor of mental health checks. I'm in favor of banning assault weapons. So that's not a gun ban. When you just say it's a gun ban, that's so incredibly misleading. So represent your opponents accurately and then disagree with your opponents. That's my point. And he didn't do that. And that's what's upsetting about this. But listen, outside of that, I would tell people on the left, if he had represented the arguments accurately that people in March for Our Lives were making, then I would have no problem with him going on NRATV. None at all. And listen, he can, if he were so inclined, he could argue, okay, listen, here's what the people in March for Our Lives are saying they're for. Here's what I disagree with. I don't agree with the assault weapons ban. He could say that. And that's a reasonable position to hold. Listen, there are some issues where there's no room for compromise. Like on the issue of corruption, if you're in favor of money in politics, you're just wrong. There's no room for like, oh, are you in favor of subverting democracy and bringing about an oligarchy and a kleptocracy, or are you not? It's like, okay, well, if you're in favor of doing that, then you're an idiot. And there's no room in the movement for people who represent the fundamental opposite of the ideology we're espousing. Is there room for being against a living wage? I would argue no. Is there room for being against Medicare for all? I would argue no. So there are some issues where, I say we should be unapologetic and say there's no room for disagreement here. I'm clear on that. You guys have heard me say it 1,000 times. I'm in favor of a purity test. I am, because I think that just means you actually believe in something, and there are some things you're willing to not compromise on. In my opinion, and maybe you guys have a different view of this, but in my opinion, guns I think there's a reasonable realm of debate and discussion to be had there. I think there's a variety of positions that are reasonable, where some people are in favor of more lax gun laws than me. Okay, that's fine. Some people are in favor of gun laws that agree completely with my opinions, and some people are a little stronger on gun laws. I think in the progressive movement, there's enough room for some variation on that issue. Again, other issues, not so much. The issue of guns, yeah, I'm okay with some variation on that. But the thing about this that makes me mad is not that he spoke to the NRA, and not even that he disagrees with lefties. It's that he's misrepresenting them in the process. So that's my issue with it. And but listen, like I said, he apologized. He said he actually supports the movement. What I would ask Killer Mike is, what exactly are you in favor of when it comes to guns? Are you in favor of keeping the laws exactly as they are? Because I don't agree with that. But that's okay, but at least represent your opponents accurately and then say you're in favor of keeping the laws exactly as they are. My hunch about Killer Mike, and this is just me guessing, he'd have to tell you, is that he's in favor of some gun reform, but just really not that much. And he likes to stress the idea that he doesn't want to ban guns and he's in favor of gun ownership. And he goes on to explain why. He says, listen, I'm a black man in America, and I think black people should arm themselves, because he argues they're under almost domestic occupation. With the drug war, for example, and police are, not viewed the same in the African-American community as they are in the white community, and they feel like they're an occupying force, and they unjustly and routinely crack down on them in an unfair way. So he's in favor of gun ownership. That's totally fine. I just want to know exactly what he's for. Instead of strawmanning your opponents and kind of smugly swatting away their non-arguments, maybe you should actually tell us exactly what you're for. And if you do that, okay, then I'm totally fine with it, and go talk to the NRA all day long if you wish.